In the United States, or at least as conveyed in movies and television, there is a tradition of the crusading district attorney who stands for the people and goes up against intractable power and helps the little man. It seems like in Canada that tradition is carried out by professors, by legalists working in law schools, and one of them is Alan Young. He has brought constitutional challenges to our gambling, obscenity, body house, and drug laws. And on this stage, a number of years ago in 2006, he spoke eloquently and passionately, and I thought persuasively, about medical marijuana and prostitution. He's a champion for people whose alternative lifestyle has brought them into conflict with the law. His current preoccupation, however, is somewhat different, and I've invited him to come out here and tell us what he's currently up to. This is Alan Young.
Thanks, Moses. We got everything running here okay. Yeah, I was asked by Moses to come speak to you about marijuana and prostitution. And I know a lot's happening. I know most of my life's been devoted to protection of hedonistic pursuits. But I kind of don't want to go down in history as the wavy gravy of lawyers. So I decided I would speak to you about something more somber and more serious, and unfortunately a little bit more depressing, because I always like talking about marijuana and the sex trade. I always find something interesting to say. I want to talk to you about the work that keeps me up at night, which is my work with the Innocence Project in the defense of the wrongfully convicted. I run a clinic at Osgoode Hall Law School, an underfunded clinic with 10 volunteer students who sit in a little cubbyhole, and we comb through transcripts, we interview witnesses, we negotiate with public officials, and if we get some money, we do some DNA testing, all to show that someone who is incarcerated has been wrongfully convicted. Now, we've had a lot of trouble getting money to do this because people don't think it's a real problem. They just think shit happens. Mistakes are made. It's a human process. There's nothing much you can do about it. And lawyers don't like to do this work. They're very much out of sight, out of mind. Once their clients go to jail, it's not their problem. So my students are really the last bastion of hope for these people. And I have to tell you something. Until the 1990s, it wasn't a problem. We didn't know. Our legal system hides its mistakes. But in the 1980s, something happened, the advent of DNA testing. So you can have a mechanism to conclusively determine if someone's guilty or innocent. And guess what? Shocking. In the United States, where they have lots of innocence projects, since 1990, they've exonerated 350 people through DNA testing. In Canada, the number is between 30 and 60, depending on who you talk to and depending on how you define wrongful conviction. And the reality is that this is the tip of the iceberg. These only represent the cases that actually come forward, and contrary to popular belief, only 10% of cases have DNA. So there's all these cases out there that are really hard to break because there's no biological marker for all this. So what I want to do today in the short time, 14 minutes, oh my God, left for me, is show you why we have a dysfunctional system that keeps generating false outcomes. This should be of concern to everybody. God forbid your son or daughter or yourself ever gets caught up in the criminal justice system when you think it's dysfunctional. You have to have faith in the system, and we don't have faith in it. So I'd like to use a little technology. I've never used PowerPoint, so I feel a bit awkward about this, and I'll get to my first slide in a minute. But let me give you a little historical overview. The reason why we have a miscarriage of justice is criminal justice at its outset was horribly barbaric, fueled by moral hysteria and scapegoating impulses. It didn't matter if you executed the right person. As long as someone was to blame for the breach of social order, everything was fine. And when you look at law in every system, really deep structure, you'll discover the legal system is set up to reach a result, not the correct result. The most important thing about a legal system is the judge or jury isn't sitting going, I don't know, what should I do? We have a system that generates results whether they're accurate or they're not accurate. Now, the first ray of light that occurred to change this comes by the personage of Voltaire from Candide fame. He was the first person to champion wrongful convictions, where he wrote some treatises on how some Protestant families were wrongfully persecuted and executed by the Roman Catholic majority. And he actually got posthumous exonerations. And what he says at the end of his quote here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but paraphrasing says, if people realize how many mistakes were made, then the entire population must rise in unison to demand vengeance. Well, that was around 1750. No one's ever risen to demand vengeance because this was a blip on the radar screen. After he wrote about this, everyone forgot about it because the legal system basically can hide all its mistakes. And so no one really championed anything. No one rose up in unison because we never knew it was a problem. And let's see if this works. And I blame this guy, okay? Judge Learned Hand is his name. Poor guy to be named Learned Hand. That's a real name, by the way. I had to check it up. It wasn't some honorary appellation. Look at that guy. You walk into court, you know you got to bring a toothbrush because you're not going home at the end of the day, okay? And I bet you if he was named Voltaire, he wouldn't have said something like this. Our procedure has always been haunted by the ghost of the innocent man convicted. It is an unreal dream. All you people who believe there's wrongful convictions, it's born of misplaced compassion and tenderness. Legal science, and that's what he believed it was, legal science generates correct results. We called it legal science as if it was the scientific method. Now, the reason why we got so fixated on saying, oh, we don't make mistakes, is because historically, we had to replace this. Not the greatest picture, but we used to try people by battle and by ordeals. Dunk them in the water. If they float, they're guilty. If they sink, they're dead, but innocent. Okay. The system worked because it was divine intervention. You could not challenge it. You had to accept the conclusion because God was speaking. In the year 1215, Pope Innocent III, convenient name, issued a papal bull, that's what they're called, decreeing that these modes of trial were superstitious. And he sent all of Europe scrambling to find something equally authoritative. And Europe went to a more mathematical system, and England went to the jury. But the reality is, we could not reduce the fallibility of the process. It makes mistakes, so we have to learn how to conceal the mistakes. Let me give you 3 quick examples of what I mean by concealing mistakes. 1, you all think appeals are a natural part of the legal process, that anyone who's convicted can appeal their conviction. Well, actually, appeals are the creation of the 20th century. We didn't need appeals before because we didn't make mistakes. It would be silly to create appeals, right? Number 2, anyone ever sat on a jury here? See, it's kind of funny. We have jury trials. I never find anyone who's ever sat on a jury. You won't like it because you're going to sit there for 5 weeks or 5 months, take notes, maybe not take notes. At the end of the day, they say, stand up, and you go, guilty, not guilty. It's a linguistic burp, people. You need an explanation. Everyone wants to know why. Have you ever thought, why do juries not explain themselves? Just go guilty, not guilty? Because they start talking, they can put their foot in their mouth, and then you find out there's a basis to challenge the conviction. So we keep things silent. In fact, in Canada, it's a criminal offense for a juror to disclose their deliberations. That's not a system that's designed to reach correct results. 3rd thing, I want to show you something. I've been waiting 30 years to make fun of this. Oh, God, of course the zipper doesn't work. In 1982, I became a lawyer. And I had to spend $800 to buy this thing, okay? So I'm going to put it on. Have you ever wondered why lawyers wear these things, why judges have ermine? We're trying to get the authority from the religious days of the trapping of religion. I was told when I graduated, when I go to Superior Court of Ontario, I had to wear this. And I was told that when I walk in, I had to address the judges as my lord or my lady. Pretty offensive. We don't do that anymore. And then I was told, when I go to court, I have to stand up and I have to bow. I'm not bowing to anybody. And that's not an arrogance. It's the wrong thing to ever demand anyone to bow. I've developed this sort of chicken thing I do. and it kind of works. Okay. So anyways, to minimize occasions for challenge, we wanted to create the trappings of religion. That's why you get the old oyez, oyez when you show up in court, because you're creating this atmosphere like the old days of the ordeal that you should just accept this, because learned people like Learned Hand are reaching the right conclusions. Now, the reality is, we now know there's wrongful convictions. Everybody knows that. And now we have to go through this painful exercise where it seems like almost every month or every 2 months, someone's exonerated, and they come out of court to the scrum, and they talk about their experience. And in popular culture, in the movies, they always go, I thank my lawyers. I thank my family for standing by me, and I thank God up above. That's not the reality. Let's look at the reality of a scrum for Williams Mullins Johnson. He was convicted of the sexual assault and murder of his niece, who he loved, because notorious forensic pathologist Charles Smith made a mistake in analyzing the body and thought there was sex abuse. He made mistakes in 22 cases. Most of them are parents who lost their children, now being classified as murderers. I can't think of any fate worse than that. So, Mullins Johnson is exonerated because other pathologists come forward and say, Smith, you didn't know what you're doing, either incompetent, or corrupt. And this is the reality, the painful reality of what happens.
I hope that my family comes to understand. I hope they understand that nothing was done to my niece. Not by me, and not by anybody else.
Simple. But that's the reality of exoneration. It's not like you come out a new person and you look at the sunshine and you think you're going to have a good life. It is a horrible thing to be wrongfully convicted, especially of killing a loved one. And what do we do in Canada? We set up a commission of inquiry, we hear some evidence, we try to come to some conclusions about why it happened. That's important. And then we go through this horrific ritual, where the person who's responsible, here's Dr. Charles Smith, he's going to give his apology.
I'm sorry. I do want to make it very clear to you that I am profoundly sorry for the role that I played in the ultimate decision that affected you. I am sorry.
You destroyed my family, my brother's relationship with me, and my niece that's still living, and my nephew that's still living. They hate me because of what you did to me. I'll never forget that, but for my own healing, I must forgive you.
That is kind of you, thank you.
Okay. Painful. Probably insincere too, which makes it even more painful. He's crying because he got caught. No apology can ever erase the horror of putting someone in jail for a crime they didn't commit. And Williams Mullins Johnson did 12 years. It takes 9 to 12 years for Innocence Projects to exonerate people. It doesn't have to be that way. Here's the message I want to get out in the last 6 minutes I have or so. We now know, after the last 20 years of all these exonerations, we have a really good statistical data on the causal factors that cause wrongful convictions. If we really cared, and I don't think we do, we could fix a lot of problems. So what I want to do is just show you 5 or 6 of the causal factors that have been identified and show you what we may or may not be able to do. So number 1, this is no surprise. You know the main culprit for wrongful conviction is identification evidence, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious to most people. 79% of all wrongful convictions have a bad ID. We are horrible observers of reality, and we have faulty recollections, but we don't admit it, and we stand up in court and go, that's the man I saw, with great confidence, and that affects juries. Look, people make mistakes. People have the poor observation. We can't change that. But here's what we can change. You see this? This is a real case. This is a real lineup. Do you believe it? It's not fake, even though it's all cops with fake mustaches. And let's see if this works. There's Ivan Henry. He spent 27 years in jail as a serial sexual rapist until they realized there was someone else in Vancouver doing this. And the prosecutor had the hubris to go to court and say, look at this photograph. He's clearly guilty. He's resisting. Okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is we have frail evidence that the police ruin all the time. In Thomas Sofino's case, they brought all the eyewitnesses forward in a room. It was like a party. We're going to have a party. Let's draw a composite. You do not interview witnesses together, because suddenly witness A is going, no, I guess you're right, the nose is more pointy, because witness B said it. So we're constantly destroying already frail evidence. We don't have to go through 79% of cases where there's wrongful convictions because of ID, because we can fix ID. Let's look at another factor. Couldn't get a picture of a person, but rats. We use a lot of rats. Oh, sorry. The jargon in law is jailhouse informant. Doesn't sound as bad as rats. But if you read this little description here from Justice Corey, who's a pretty conservative judge who did the Sofino inquiry, he refers to them as vultures, moving to rotting flesh or sharks the blood. In Thomas Sofino's case, 11 jailhouse informants came forward to say, I was in a cell with Thomas Sofino, and he confessed to the crime. They're all lying because they're making deals with the devil. They're getting early parole release. They're getting charges withdrawn. And we keep using these people to falsely convict people. And you know what's really weird in Sofino's case? Of the 11 informants who came forward, one was probably the killer. Matthew Arnold. He's dead now, so they can't conclude the case. But that's the best thing you can do, is if you are the killer, go and rat out somebody else. 18% of wrongful convictions are a result of using rodents. Here's some other lab rats. We love our scientists. You're all here because you admire and respect scientists. Most of the people talking here are scientists. Guess what? This should shock you. 55% of all wrongful convictions are a result of people in white lab coats because we believe in them. And it's hard to know why this happens, but it's largely because we are an adversarial competitive system of law. And these scientists get co-opted into the adversarial system. Science is collaboration. It should be a bunch of people in white lab coats together, but it's a competitive exercise in law. You hire your expert to say the accused is insane, and someone else hires another psychiatrist to say not insane. You basically pay for what you get for. I don't know if it's incompetence or it's corruption, but the adversarial system's making it very difficult for scientists to actually assist the process. They're skewing the process. 55% scientific error. The competitive process also skews what lawyers are able to do. So we have these popular images of lawyers that really aren't helpful for reducing miscarriage of justice. We have the clever crusader, we got the entertainer, we got the zealous law and order prosecutor who's aggressive, and then of course we have, the incompetent showboater. Lawyers are part of the problem because they're not there for accuracy. So much is about their personality and their advocacy. You have a great lawyer. Who cares? It's what the facts say. It shouldn't be about the performance of the lawyer, but unfortunately it is. So let me get, oh my God, time. Let me get to the last factor, which is one of our cases, false confessions. I know it's counterintuitive to believe that people falsely confess, but 16% of all wrongful convictions are false confessions. This is a document from a case, Romeo Fillion. Romeo Fillion confessed to a murder that happened in 1969 in Ottawa. Why did he falsely confess? He wanted to impress his boyfriend. He wanted to get a break from the rigorous interrogation. Thought, I'd just come out and say I was joking. That never works. And he wanted a little attention. A lot of people falsely confess to get attention. So he comes to us, we start our investigation, and we ask for these things called occurrence reports. This is through access to information. There's nothing there, right? Anytime you ask the police for something, they come up with some number for an exemption. They could say, Bob's your uncle, and they get an exemption. It's unbelievable. Really hard to get information from them. But that's just more of the same. 19(1)D is an exemption. But guess what was in this document? Some parole officer who knew Fillion in his prison must have felt sorry for him, sent us a document that we couldn't believe what we saw. Here's what it is. I don't know if you can read it. The third paragraph, it's hard to read, but I'll just paraphrase it. It says, we verified that he was in Trenton at the time, making it impossible for him to arrive in Ottawa to commit the murder. And the next line, where there's a question mark, we do not believe that he's responsible for this murder. And that underlining, by the way, is the trial prosecutor. He knew there was an alibi, and it was suppressed at trial. And then when we come 30 years later and try to find out, they suppress it again through their exemptions. It was just an accident that we could clear Romeo Fillion. And everything with wrongful conviction work is about fighting obstacles. Public officials do not want to go back in time. They only lose. They only stand to lose. They can't win on these reviews. So they put so many obstacles in your way that the work I find is really tiring, stressful, and frustrating. So we adopted as our slogan a line from Bruce Cockburn, which I really like. Kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. That's what we do as the Innocence Project. With no money, but we managed to exonerate at least Romeo Fillion. We need to keep kicking. And if I can be indulged for 2 minutes, because I see I'm out of time, I'd like to just run a slideshow of Canada's Hall of Infamy. I'd like you to see the people that have been victims of our legal process. And there's a common denominator to all these people, not race, not ethnicity. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you're going to hear a delightful song from Alan Price from the movie Oh Lucky Man, which will tell you what the common denominator is. So here we go.
We all want justice, but you got to have the money to buy it. You'd have to be a fool to close your eyes and deny it. There's a lot of poor people who are walking the streets of my town, too blind to see that justice is used to do them right down. All through life from beginning to end. You pay your monthly installments. Next to health is wealth, and only wealth will buy you justice. There'll always be a fool who insists on taking his chances, and that is the man who believes in true love romances. He will trust and rely on the goodness in human nature. Now a judge will tell you that's a pathetic creature. All through life from beginning to end, you pay your monthly installments. Next to health is wealth, and only wealth will buy you justice. And money, justice, money, and a justice, money, justice.
Thank you for listening. And I don't think it was a very veiled ploy there. If any of you can help and like to help us with our difficult work, that's how you contact us. Thank you very much.
Bravo. Wow.
Thanks, Moses.
Thank you so much. So well done. Thank you. Okay, cheers.